How are we doing tonight? Good? All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. I guess I'll start with, hi, I'm Mike Wilcox. Hi. Welcome to our semi-annual update, which implies there's going to be another. I know how to divide by 2. We'll start with introductions. I'll kind of outline the evening a little bit. And then I'll turn the mic over to Wayne. So we'll start with Wayne. There's Wayne. Everybody say, hey, Wayne. Hey, Wayne. I know Greg's here. I don't know where Greg's at. The intros may take longer than the meeting. Joe, I know Joe's up here. Laura somewhere. Laura's back there. Eric. Amy. Vanessa. Pamela. There's Pam back there. The other Essa, Marissa, Danielle, Chad, there's Chad. Chad said he's got entertainment tonight. He's got a little, you shouldn't have told me that. He's got a little flower. I know it sprays water out. Gail, Bridget, and our hometown hero, Rita, somewhere. Hi, Rita. Go ahead and stand up, Rita. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that was good, wasn't it? All right. So, as I said, this is our semi-annual meeting, and it's something that we started a few years ago that we thought would be helpful. Kind of a recap of last year, discussion of what we see going on. We're going to have some variety tonight. The variety will involve some different things we've not talked about before, but something we know a little bit about, I think you guys will find benefit from. So, a little different meeting than we normally had, and we're all kind of excited to present that to you. With that, I know we have a couple guests in the audience, and so I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't, welcome those folks that are guests of our clients. We appreciate that, and we appreciate you being here. And I want to give you a little backdrop of our office and why we're doing this meeting today, and maybe what makes us a little different. I promise I will keep it less than, how long, Vanessa, an hour? That's not bad, an hour, right? No. So with that, a little bit about Meyer & Associates. Obviously, we're a financial planning firm. As financial planners, what our goal is to help our clients see where they are today with their finances versus their goals and objectives and where they see themselves tomorrow. And then we try to help them match it up. What kind of position am I in? Am I doing okay? Financial planning is not just investing or tax planning. It's everything in combination. It's sitting down and saying, here's where I am, here's where I'd like to be, and then try to develop a strategy to get from point A to point B. That's what we do. And I will keep my commercial short. I think that your sponsor, our client that brought you along and said, hey, you ought to meet these folks, talk to them. You know, I think I always say we're now not always right, but we try to be. We're a homegrown, under the name Meyer & Associates comes from Wayne Meyer. We're an independent firm. We've been at it now since 1984. Now, Wayne tells me he's 29. So don't let that math really scare you away, because he can do math better than that. But we've been at it a long time. And I guess and I'll touch on another thing, but I guess if what I'd want you to know is our goal is to help our clients, help them with ideas of, how to grow money, avoid taxes, and to make it really easy, wouldn't you just love to know what Wayne knows about money? Right? That's what the business is about. That's really the foundation of it. Is we're going to sit down if you meet with us and go through a financial plan, and we're going to share with you what we know about money and say, boy, if I were you, here's what I'd do. Okay? So I guess that's the offer summarized, is we want to share with you what we know about financial planning and take a Midwestern approach. And what I mean by that is we don't beg people to become clients. We don't pressure you to become clients. What we want to do is walk you through a financial plan. If it makes sense, great. If it doesn't, that happens. All right? So the last thing I'll say Usually I get an applause for that. You guys obviously have not seen me speak for 2 or 3 or 4 hours. And I'm really a ham. If I do this, that means you have to applause. If I do that, that means don't applause. You got it now. All right. So anyways, I guess the last thing I would say is, those of you that are guests, you have evaluations there. We try to make it easy for you. If you decide you want to come visit with us, circle the time and hand it to one of us, one of our assistants. We have that time set aside. You'll meet with myself, Greg, or Joe. We'll walk you through and talk about the financial planning process, how it may fit for you, and where you may benefit. Okay? All right. With that, I will turn it over to Wayne, and he will get us started. Thank you, guys.
So welcome. I thought I'd share with you, if you haven't taken the time to read the signs that we have on the front of our building, I thought I'd share them with you tonight. The one on top is the one that you see when you walk through the front door. The one on the bottom is what our staff sees when they walk through the door in the back when they come to work every single day. So I thought we'd share that with you. So I'm going to do a recap of 2017. I got a bunch of notes up here because a lot of things happened, and they have put together a ton of slides, okay? So hopefully I can talk and keep these going, because one of the things I've had an issue with that Rita will attest to is I have a difficult time chewing gum and walking. So I don't know about talking and clicking at the same time. We'll have to see how it goes. So I got to turn this on. Okay, so the Dow opens 2017 at 19,794, and all the analysts predict Dow 20,000. Okay, now that's a pretty good prediction. You know, they didn't have far to go to get to 20 grand, but it's okay. They obviously were right. But one of the big things that happened at the beginning of 2017 is I spent so much time consoling Greg and Mike on the passing of Princess Leia. It was horrible. I'm telling you, these guys cried for weeks and weeks before I was able to get them to calm down. So the markets are going. Still reaction from the election. Markets are moving up, setting kind of new records every single day. On the 20th of January, President Trump is inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States. And one of the things that took place on that inauguration was the tweets began. Okay? The tweets began. And the Republicans took over Washington. And the next thing that took place in 2017 was we started to look at the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And so that whole discussion started, and that's was the focus for the first 3 or 4 months of the Republicans' takeover in Washington. And then as we kind of went through that stuff, what happened is that the market went up and the tweets continued, okay? And so with that, we also then ran into a couple other issues. Next thing that happened is the Fed decided that they were going to begin raising rates. One of several that they were going to do during the course of the year. And in normal circumstances, what happens when the Fed decides to raise rates is the markets have a reaction to that. And normally the reaction is the markets kind of take a dip back, take a look, assess what it's going to mean, and then decide from that point in time as to whether or not they're going to move forward or we're going to go into a correction. So anyway, the Feds raised the rate a quarter of a point, and the markets went right up from there. No correction. I just heard, was somebody sending me a siren? No? Okay. I thought that was done. So the markets went right up from there. And then the thing that really got me after that is the tweets kept coming. All right. And so you're going to see a kind of a common theme in here about the tweets. But on a personal note, the next thing that happened for us is Rita and I had another great grandbaby. All right. So there she is. That's Brooklyn. So in May, Comey, the head of the FBI, lost his job. Kind of a set of precedent out there as far as it was one of the first times ever that a reigning FBI chair was released at midterm in their position. And in June, the Fed came back, raised rates again, and the markets went up. Okay, nothing changed. Comey got fired, markets went up. Fed raised rates, markets went up. So we're seeing this common trend all year long. Markets are accelerating, and we're not seeing much in the way of corrections that are taking place as we're seeing this happen. The thing is that when the market started going up, in June, the Dow closed at 21,349. So obviously the analysts back in January were right. We saw Dow 20,000, and now they're predicting Dow 24,000. Okay, big number. People are sitting back saying, wow, I mean, we're in territory we've never seen. 24,000 sounds like the Nikkei or something that, where they're dealing in foreign currency that we have no knowledge of. So Dow 24,000, big number. And so after the analysts predict that the Dow's going to hit 24,000, what do you think happened? The tweets kept coming, all right? The tweets just keep coming. Then the next thing that happened was we had this fight over the Affordable Care Act, and it never passed. And so the Affordable Care Act, as we know it today, was still in existence at that particular time. And then, our president was not real happy over that. So what did he do? He went back to the American public, and the markets went up, but he went back to the American public with some tweets and said, hey, listen, this is not my fault. I tried to get rid of this thing, but the reality is we just couldn't get it done. If you think about it, it was an issue where, you have to give the Democrats credit because, and this is my political statement for the night, when Barack Obama was elected president and he had the House and Senate, they passed everything. You name it, they got it on the docket, they passed it. They didn't care what Republicans thought. They could have cared less. They had an agenda. They went after it. So with Trump coming on board and having control of the House and Senate, there was a lot of thought that that's exactly what was going to happen. The Republicans were going to take over. They were going to come in. They were going to make all these changes, things. And what we really found out is that they, for the first 6 months of this year, of last year, couldn't get out of their own way. There was so much infighting in between them that they couldn't accomplish absolutely anything during that period of time. A lot of deregulation took place, but those were all executive orders coming out of the White House directly. Deregulation helped markets, kept the markets going, helped business, and so those things helped spur what was going on within the economy, but actual true legislation, there was nothing that got done during that period of time. In August, we saw 2 hurricanes hit, Harvey and Irma, and they wreaked havoc in Puerto Rico and in Texas, in those areas. I mean, there was a lot of loss of life, lots of loss of properties, and so they really took their toll. But the ironic part about it is, when Katrina hit, we had a downturn in the market. This time, wrong market. This time that didn't happen. So that was, kind of a shock to us when we saw that because the markets didn't react negatively. The other thing that happened back then was, I have to say, this is Mike's daughter, okay, right here. This is Mike's daughter who went off to, I got to say this right, audiology school. Okay, and so she's going to help Mike out because he's deaf in one ear and he can't hear out of the other one. So, but he doesn't want to do anything about that till she graduates, because then he gets them for free. So so between now and then, you'll just have to put up with him. Next thing that happened was my oldest granddaughter got married. And fortunately, she invited Rita and I. So that was a good thing. That happened for us, right? And then right after that, my granddaughter went off, that's Greg's daughter, went off to medical school, okay? And I am proud to say she's going to be a psychologist because that's what her grandpa needs. So there you go. But then after all that happened, the markets just continued to go up. And we just kept seeing more and more records being set, markets charging forward on all fronts. Dow, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500. In October, we have, well, and of course the tweets just kept coming, right? In October, we had a mass shooting in Vegas. And it's probably one of the worst that we've experienced here in the United States. The statistics came out and they basically said that we had 58 people that were killed during that shooting. 851 were either wounded or injured during that period of time from one guy. So I just tell you, take a moment of silence. I mean, that was devastating for this country. Thanks. After that, we went on and we have the tensions rising in North Korea and the U.S. are back and forth over the nuclear arms race that North Korea wants to continue to do. I know that one time, I think it was last year, somebody asked me, hey, what would you do about the guy in North Korea? And I said, you know, it's hard for me to say because, you know, I'm an old military guy. So for any of you that are old military guys, you know exactly what you'd be doing. So, you know, it's a matter, but diplomacy should work. You know, if not, a M16 works really well as well too. So anyway, after even with the tensions going on, and we're sending ships into the Gulf, and what we got is markets still going up. And we're sitting back every day saying, look, these markets are not reacting like normal. We're seeing events take place that should have negative impacts on the markets. We're just not seeing it. And so with that, you know, our portfolios stay strong, growth rates stay strong, and the tweets stay strong. In November, we saw some major fires in California. And yet the markets continue to move forward. That just nothing was going to slow these markets down. It didn't matter what happened. And in December, the Fed raised rates again. And even with the third Fed rate that we saw, the markets still continue to go up. And then one great thing happened is that I was finally able to console Greg and Mike over Princess Leia, because a brand new Star Wars movie came out with a new heroine. And so they were happy. They went to the theater and these guys were excited to see that they had somebody else that they could watch for the next few years. So what happened next? Well, the long-awaited tax reform bill passed in December. And one of the things that took place with that tax reform bill is from a market standpoint, it was not a huge impact for individuals. So for you guys out here, you know, are you going to see some reduction in the amount of taxes that you pay? The answer is yes. Will it be much? Well, Chad tells me and Gail tells me that if they're doing your taxes, you're probably going to pay about 75% less than what you were. But if anybody else is doing it, you're probably not going to see much of a change. Not sure exactly. Chad, that's where he talked about the entertainment, so I'm sure that's part of what he's talking about. But the reality is, from a business standpoint, it made a huge difference. We went from a 35% tax bracket down to a 21% tax bracket. And I want to tell you kind of what that really means. Those are big numbers, and they, you know, it sounds like a huge percentage change. But, you know, we're a small business. And within our own structure as a business, the amount of money that we're going to save from just the taxes we paid in 2017 will allow us to hire 2 brand new people and pay them well. And that's just on the tax savings that we're going to have based on this reform that took place. That's a huge deal for businesses. And if businesses across the country do the same thing, they hire new people, they put money into research and development, then what we're going to see is our economy is going to get stronger than what it is today. More people are working, and that's going to be great for businesses and great for you sitting here. It's going to give us an opportunity that we haven't had in quite a while. So what happened after that? Well, the analysts are predicting Dow 25,000. Now, we're in December, so I'm guessing they might have been right, but I've got hindsight here. So Dow 25,000, another record. Nobody expects that number to be seen, especially in a period of time where we're only talking about 13 months. We're not talking about 13 years. Because dating myself, I'm going back and telling you I remember Dow 600. And we didn't get from Dow 600 to Dow 26,000 in a straight line. But in 13 months, this market went up about 48%. That's an amazing thing to see happen in markets that we have not seen like this since the late 1990s. The last year of Bush's administration and the 8 years of Obama's administration, the markets were horrible. We were constantly fighting volatility. Markets were moving in directions we couldn't figure out why. Everything was reactionary. It was impossible to plan for anything. We had to wait and see what the markets would do before we could step in and make any kind of corrections or any kind of changes within the platforms themselves to try and accommodate for that. By the time we made the changes, the markets were moving in a different direction. And so it made money management extremely difficult during that period of time. This is back more in the time when I was having fun in this business back in the late 70s, okay? Even though we went through a double down in the mid 70s, in the late 70s, you could do some planning. I mean, the markets reacted in certain ways. Certain situations happened, markets reacted. It was very, very plannable because you knew what was going to take place. And this year has been a year, this upcoming 2017 and hopefully in 18 are years that we can actually go out and plan, and we have the ability to go out and research and change and do different maneuvers within the platforms to continue to get the assets to continue to grow. So that's been a good thing. So the predicted 25,000, and right at the very end of the year, it was almost New Year's Eve, I think, and I got a few personal tweets from the president, and I certainly appreciated that, and he kind of let me know what was going to happen in January, and so we were able to make some significant changes in December. I gave Joe some inside information that I got from him, and I let Joe share the tweets that we got. So that was what kind of happened in 2017. So with that, we had a great year. It was a lot of fun. It was fun to watch the markets. A little nerve-wracking since we hadn't seen this in a long time, but it certainly was fun. And I hope you all enjoyed opening your statements from the years that you refused to open. Okay, you guys can laugh, but I know you're out there that you refused to open those statements up. Okay, so I hope you had a good time in 2017. And we're hoping that 2018 is going to bring more of the same, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So what I'd like to do now is ask Joe to come up, and Joe is going to enlighten you with his vast array of investment jargon that he came up with. He's invented some new words. He calls it Joe Coin, and so he'll have some of that for sale at the end of the night, some Joe Coin. And so you have to make sure that when you buy Joe Coin, that you find somebody else that will redeem it for you, okay? With that, Joe?
All right, so like Wayne said, market was good last year. He said it was fun to watch. It was much easier not to make money than it was, or to make money than it was not to make money. So, we were a lot of hands off. We set up platforms well. Went into our traditional broad-based investments, and then hedged ourselves towards a couple different areas like financials, technology, aerospace and defense, all the things that we anticipated were going to benefit from a Trump presidency. So deregulation, like Wayne said, was big for banks. Trump is very pro-technology, and certainly military spending plays well for the aerospace and defense sector of the market. So those are things that we tried to hedge towards. last year, and like I said, everything turned out well. Hopefully, everybody did or does agree with that. So currently, what are we doing? We have similar broad-based investment approach, and then we are taking our hedge towards a couple different areas. One being retail. With this new tax reform, the retail industry in the past has suffered unlike other industries in tax reform. They don't get a lot of tax breaks, so they fall into this window where we believe that we're going to see some big pushes in their stock prices because of the reform and the big tax breaks that they get. Another place that we're heading to, we were in emerging markets last year, which usually ends up being one of those areas that is, it's a little shifty. You're dealing with a lot of small countries. And some big countries, China, they're always an emerging market because they play with their economy so much they can't be taken seriously all the time. But we're sticking with it. We saw big growth out of there. We expect that we're going to see a lot of the same stuff this year. The hardest thing that we're going to be doing is our bond market. Buying stocks is relatively easy. If you got an idea, you got a protocol, you build yourself an investment budget, you can buy stocks pretty easily. Bonds, whole different universe. You're not dealing with a one price issue. You have multiple issues, multiple durations. You've got credit quality to worry about. You've got municipal bonds, corporate bonds, U.S. Treasuries, and you've got a central banking system that is raising rates and causing the yield on your bonds to fluctuate whenever they decide to raise rates or not raise rates. So the bond area of our accounts is going to be probably the most difficult thing to manage going forward. So we are taking an approach where we kind of have to suck up somewhat relatively mediocre returns on bonds. The only areas that are really posting big returns are going to be your junk bonds, your low credit bonds. And when we take a look at those and we think, do we want to go and invest in there? Can we get some yield out of those bonds and help the side of the portfolios that aren't invested in stocks? And sure, we can go and take that risk. But it's a risk that we don't necessarily want to take with what everybody in this room would probably consider to be the safer part of your account. If we want to take on more risk in the account, we can accomplish the potential for higher returns with the same risk just by increasing the amount of stock that you have in your portfolio. So, we're looking at bonds and just saying, we want to keep it safe. We want to go the status quo. We don't want to try and lean on that for extra income inside the accounts or extra growth in the accounts. We'll rely on the stock sides to do that, so that if the stock market does take the dip or does make that correction, we don't have to turn around and worry about what our bonds are doing as well. We still will worry, but we're not going to worry as much because we're going to make sure that we're dealing with high quality stuff. Let me make sure I'm in the right spot. So we are sticking with our exchange traded funds. As of right now, the majority of everybody in here that has a managed platform, we're using exchange traded funds. Vanguard put out a release at the end of the year that said from 2008 to 2017, we've seen an inflow of $890 billion into exchange traded funds and $890 some billion out of what you would consider a traditional mutual fund. Reason is, same reason we got into them, discipline. In these markets that we're dealing with, the last thing that I want to worry about is having an investment that is not disciplined to what the investment objective is. So we're going to stick with our exchange traded funds as of right now and continue on this same disciplined approach that we've been going with for the last few years. where we don't have to worry about the bond managers or the mutual fund managers going in and making adjustments to your investment holdings that are outside the realm of what we initially picked them for. And then the last thing Wayne wanted me to talk about was cryptocurrency. So if nobody knows or heard of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, he asked that I put together this video that is somewhat of a parody to try and explain it a little bit better. The joke there was that the ratio between Stanley Nichols and Schrute-Bucks is the same as leprechauns to unicorns. Cryptocurrency is something that most of us, will at some point in our life probably experience, whether you fight the system or not, but not in its state today. Its state today is way too volatile. Bitcoin is one of the biggest culprits of cryptocurrency culprits. It's probably going to be a way of life for a lot of us at some point in time, but digital money, the ease of transferring money from one person to the other without having to deal with cash, without having to deal with credit cards, banking systems, all that kind of stuff. But in the unregulated world that it's in today, it's very scary. We saw Bitcoin, which is the largest producer of cryptocurrency, or the largest exchange, up to 20,000 for 20,000 US dollars for one Bitcoin. Today, it closed under $10,000. So had you bought it a month ago, you'd lost half your money by now. So we're one government regulation away from Bitcoin being brought back to reality, all cryptocurrencies being brought back to reality and having a real exchange rate. There are some countries out there with deflation problems that are using cryptocurrency to try and save their countries. Good for them, bad for other countries out there that don't have the ability to do that, where they are exchanging their own dollar for cryptocurrency, letting their dollar deflate, and then turn around and buying it back. So there is some, I don't want to call that manipulation, but it certainly causes a lot of worry and will send tremors through everybody's currency if stuff like that is a continued program for countries like Argentina, Chile, some countries that don't have an inflating dollar. So we're staying away from cryptocurrency as of right now. People need to remember that it's not a stock. You're not buying stock in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just a currency, no different than the US dollar. So it's just exchanging the dollar for the Canadian dollar. What's the exchange rate and what's driving Bitcoin so high? It's the scarcity, because they only make so much of it every day. And it sounds weird. They mine for Bitcoin. Okay, so how do you mine for cryptocurrency? It's an electronical process. It's performing work for Bitcoin, and they'll pay you in Bitcoin. They only make so much, but it uses tons and tons of energy. The amount of mining that happens for just Bitcoin alone, which only makes up half of the cryptocurrency out there, is the same as it takes to power the country of Serbia for a day. So there is tons and tons of energy, tons of pressure on our electrical grids to allow this to continue. So we probably will see government regulation. South Korea has also come out and said that they're not going to allow their currency to be exchanged. And that's probably one of the big reasons that you see Bitcoin drop half its value in the US dollar and across everybody else's dollar as well too. So and I think that's probably all I have to talk about.
Wayne had pointed out, this does not have a tremendous impact on most individual clients. It does have a huge impact on almost every single business out there. We essentially have on corporate rates have been dropped 40%. They put some incentives in out there to kind of incentivize people to adopt new policies, social engineering. We've heard of Paid Leave Act, correct? Well, now they actually put a Paid Leave Act credit out there. So not many businesses were paying for people to stay home after maternities. They now have like a 25% credit. They went out there and they want business to invest within domestically, and they want them to hire domestically. So this bill, they're touting that this bill is going to create 339,000 jobs. Significant amount of jobs? Not really when you look at our normal hiring, but it's only related to the bill itself. But what it will do is we've had stagnant wage growth. And they're hoping that, as Wayne said, either people are going to hire, but more importantly, they're hoping that wages will be increased or benefits, which will definitely spur the economy that way. So you're not necessarily going to get an economic boost through the bill based on your tax return, but you probably will through your returns and investments, or if you're still working, through wages. So Gail and I are going to go ahead and just take a few minutes to try to go over a few key provisions of the bill. And you're always welcome to come up to us afterward if you have a private question you want to ask. So, Gail, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to go over a little bit of the individual tax reform changes. For those of you that got my email in late December, that went over a lot more detail, and it's also, there's a lot of detail in the February newsletter that's coming out shortly. These are just some things that I thought would be good to talk about tonight because it is tax season and good things to know during taxes right now. As far as 2017 goes, income, deductions, dependents, everything's pretty much going to be the same. There is going to be one change for itemized deductions, and that is if you were able to take medical expenses before, or you tried to take medical expenses, you knew that you had to come up with a certain percentage in order to be able to deduct a dollar. That percentage for the last few years has been 10%. For 2017 and 2018 only, they've reduced that to 7.5%. I don't know why it's only 2 years, but apparently a congressman needs a medical procedure that's going to cover 2 years. Also, nothing has changed as far as investment expenses, charitable contributions, employment-related deductions. That's all going to stay the same. Dependents, you're going to have the same dependents, same kind of income is going to be taxed. So for 2017, it's not going to be a whole lot different. One of the things that I did want to mention is personal and casualty losses. That's always been a deduction, a Schedule A deduction. It's subject to a 10% floor before you can take a dollar, so it's always been pretty hard for people to take that, especially if you had any kind of insurance. But this was for people that had fire and floods and thefts. But the reason I wanted to bring it up tonight is because of the flooding that we had in this area back in June. The president did declare some parts of Bay City or Bay County and Saginaw County presidential disaster areas. And there's a special tax benefit when you have disaster in an area that's presidential disaster area. You have a choice to either take the deduction in the year that just passed and amend the prior year return, so we could amend 2016 if you have a loss, or you could take it on the 2017 return, whichever one works out better. You can take the better of the two. That's really important because a lot of the people that did have the flooding did not have insurance that covered flood protection. And so it's something that if you had it or you know somebody that had it, it's probably a good thing to bring up to your tax preparer. It's still a hard deduction that they're going to have to meet some income floors before they can take anything, and it is part of an itemized deduction still, but it's something to look at because it's going to be a big deduction for people that do take advantage of it, especially since a lot of times nothing was covered for insurance. So just wanted to make sure that was brought up. That particular deduction, the casualty and theft loss deduction, is changing for 2018. You're not going to be able to take losses for just fires and any kind of a disaster that you have, accident, vandalism, or anything like that. The only thing that you'll be able to take a deduction for is if there is a federal declared disaster in your area. So it's changing for 18, but for 17 it's still the same. Good for people that experienced all the disaster that we had last year with all the hurricanes and the flooding. Tax planning for 2018 going forward. Like was said earlier, most people are going to see a little bit of a change in their taxes. It's not going to be a ton. Many people will see a decrease in their taxes by a couple percentage. Some people aren't going to see a whole lot change at all. And there are some people that are actually going to see an increase. If you looked at anything that was published in the tax reform bill, you saw that the tax brackets, each one of the tax brackets went down by a couple of points. So on the surface, it looks like taxes went down, which is true. The tax brackets did go down, but the brackets themselves changed. And if you're at the higher end of your tax bracket prior to the tax law change, you might be at the low end of the higher tax bracket starting in 2018. So just to give you a heads up, it's not going to happen for everybody, but it might happen for some people. Another thing that's changed is the standard deduction, and probably most of you heard about this. The standard deduction, depending upon your filing status, has almost doubled. From a single person, it used to be a little over $6,000. I think it was $6,350, and it's going to $12,000. For a married couple, it was $12,600. It's now going to $24,000. So that has increased, which sounds great. It's going to be harder and harder to itemize deductions, and that's kind of what they're going for. And it's going to work. People aren't going to be able to itemize as much as we have in the past. There's going to be a lot of changes in the itemized deductions. The medical and dental expenses, as I said earlier, medical, you can still take a 7.5% reduction. After 2018, it goes back up to 10%. Real estate taxes, state and local withholding taxes, all that has a $10,000 cap. If you're over that, you don't get any more. Contributions, charitable contributions are not touched with the tax reform bill, except for there's an increase in a percentage that you can donate. Not a big deal. But one of the things that if you are of age where you have required minimum distributions, and I'm pretty sure probably most of the advisors talk to people who are taking required minimum distributions. Now that it's so hard to itemize deductions, you might want to talk to your advisor about if you give a lot of money to charity, do it through your RMD direct transfer. That might be a better option for you rather than to just continue to make the contributions where there's no deduction. Recently we got the new tax rate schedules, and some of people who are getting a paycheck may have seen a small increase in their paychecks. They are supposed to go into effect by February 15th, so if you haven't seen it yet, you will be seeing it. It's not going to be a big increase. I did a projection for someone, single person, not 65, making about $50,000 a year, and it turns out they're going to be making about $30 more net in their paycheck as long as they don't change anything. So they'll get $30 more a week in their paycheck. At the end of the year, when they go to file their taxes, they're going to see about a $300 decrease in their tax refund. Now, I can say that right now, and everybody's thinking, okay, that sounds great. $30 a week is going to be more, it's going to be better than losing $300 at the end of the year. But if you've done taxes as long as we have, you know that people don't remember the $30 a week that they get in their paycheck. They remember when you look and compare last year and this year, how come I'm getting $300 less in my tax refund? So just keep that in mind when you go to have your taxes done. Unless you change something, you're probably going to see a reduce in your refund. If you don't want that to happen, you're going to need to talk to whoever handles human resources or your withholding and fill out a new W-4 for it. Standard deductions, we had talked about, they have increased, and that's one of the reasons why there's new tax rate schedules is because it takes into account the new standard deductions.
So there's a few other significant changes when it comes to tax planning that's going to be happening. We have, just taking the way that we file in a status, okay, so let's say we had a married couple with 2 kids. This year they get $12,600 as the standard deduction. Next year they're going to get $24,000, right? But they're going to end up losing their exemptions. They lose $16,000 in exemptions. So I'm just saying this facetiously, but if this was ever a tax planning point, my wife would definitely disagree with me. If they were to divorce and each take a child, they would end up having $36,000 in actual standard deduction. They would end up with $18,000 apiece, which is really quirky. Because it's actually reversing social engineering in our economy. But just one of those things where you think divorce might actually help you in tax. With that being said, though, No, I am not promoting divorce, but I'm just saying, hypothetically, if you want to reduce your taxes, no. One of the other things that comes out of that, speaking of divorce, not in the current year, but in the following year, we're going to lose the ability to deduct alimony, and the receiver will no longer have to report the alimony as income. So divorce attorneys are going to be probably fairly busy this year, trying to finalize divorces if they're on one side, or if you're on the other side, you're going to want to drag your feet and get past 1231 of 18, so you wouldn't have to pay for your side of the alimony. 529 plans, only could use them for college education in the past, no longer have to do that. You can actually use a 529 plan, which gets you a state deduction when you fund them for private school, religious education. It's the closest thing we've ever came to a slight voucher system where we actually can get some sort of tax benefit for putting a child through a religious school or a private school. So that's another thing that came out of it. There are two things that came out of this that will affect our senators, our congressmen, and then also some of Trump's taxes. So if you are a senator or congressman, you get a $3,000 living expense deduction for going to Washington each year. That's actually going to disappear. Big deal, right? Well, one of the other things that disappears is if, and I work on some of these tax plans for a lot of the real estate developers, you can go ahead, make a large investment, generate this huge loss, wipe out all your income and you pay no tax, right? We call that the Trump plan. Then you go forward, you take that loss forward to the next year, you wipe out that income. You take that loss forward to the next year and wipe out that income. I have clients that haven't paid taxes in about 7-8 years. They're changing that. They said no longer are we going to allow somebody to carry forward a loss and wipe out all of their income. They can only carry forward, they can carry it forward indefinitely, which is a change. You used to have a statute on how far we could carry forward a loss, but they now have to pay at least on 20% of their income. So they said you can use that loss up to 80% of your income, and then the rest of it you actually have to pay tax on. So there are going to be very few people in that category who use these tax benefits or these preferences that are going to not be able to not pay tax anymore. So that's just another change where they kind of sunk their heels in a little bit. And it wasn't very, just to go back to Gal's point about the $10,000, I like politics. I like to look at why things happen the way they do. And if you all know that Trump did not get any support from the West Coast, really, California or New York, right? The two highest tax states, that has the most amount of taxes that are claimed on the Schedule A, itemizing deductions. So that was definitely a political move to go ahead and claw back at those two states. Kind of vicious in my mind, but in any event, that was one of the things that he did just to kind of make sure that Nancy Pelosi's group and Chuck Schumer's group had to pay a little bit more. So, yeah, we have a few more things.
One of the things that Chad had started to get into, I want to expand on a little bit, the dependency exemptions and the personal exemptions after 2017 are no longer going to be available. So I was talking to somebody and I said there's some good that looks like it's really good on the surface, but when you look deeper, it's not really as good as it looks. The $24,000 a married couple will almost double their standard deduction for. They also, if they have 4 kids, like Chad said, they're going to lose $4,000 per person on that return. So if they have 4 kids, and then the 2 of them, another 2, so 6 times 4, that's $24,000. They're actually going to lose money by the tax law. Now, to be fair, there is a change in the child tax credit also. Children under 17 can, the child tax credit used to be $1,000. It has gone up to $2,000, so that makes up for some of it. But if it's now no longer a child and it's maybe a parent that you're taking as a dependent or a college-aged kid that you're taking as a dependent, then the deduction is only $500. So those people, again, they might see more taxes that they're paying rather than the lower tax that we thought was going to be coming about. The other thing I wanted to mention is, just because of you guys are investors and financial people, the estate tax deduction has doubled from what it was before for a married couple. The exclusion amount is $11.2 million, And for a single person, it's half that. So I'm sure your advisors, if you have to worry about that, will discuss that during your tax planning. One good thing that was a lot of talk in a lot of the different tax reform plans that were out there, and there was a bunch of stuff out there, a lot of it didn't come true. The long-term capital gains rates are still around, and they're not scheduled to go away. So if you have are in the lower income tax brackets, you still have a lower tax on your long-term gains and qualified dividends. Same thing with the education credits and the tuition deductions. Those were scheduled to go away in some of the tax reform versions. Those have not been touched. So a couple of things, they had income limits that made it hard for people to take the credit for. One of them is the child tax credit. One good thing about that is people who haven't gotten the child tax credit in eons because they make too much money are now going to be able to get the child tax credit because it jumped by quite a bit. I think it's 400,000. Yeah, and whereas before it was 110. Yeah, so it jumped a lot. So that's going to be good for people. I think that's it.
So just in closing, I mean, the big winners on the tax bracket slide are the more you make, the better the benefit you probably have. One little thing just out there, if you know people that have been penalized after 2018, the individual mandate's going to go away. And we don't do necessarily a lot of returns, but I take care of a few people who make very little money. They make $15,000 a year, and then they're supposed to come up with their health insurance, and they always have to pay that $695 penalty. And I always hated that because I'm thinking, you can't afford the insurance, you can't go to the thing. You're literally taking home less than $1,000 a month, so $695 is a lot of money to them. But now they're going to say if you don't want to participate, or if you can't participate, at least you're not going to get a penalty anymore.
I won't be real long. I don't have any slides or pictures, although I'm going to start preparing for our next meeting. I'm sure I can find a few here in the office that will have some material for our next meeting. Before I was going to go through and talk about, we get lots of information in our office regarding market information, college planning, Social Security, things that we're trying to keep abreast of for you guys to make sure we're giving the best advice we can. And the other day, I think everyone got this handed out to them coming in, was a flyer, just information we received regarding cybersecurity. And I told Wayne, I said, gosh, that's something that's on our radar. If there's things that we can be doing or making sure that our clients are aware of to try to protect ourselves from cybersecurity, passwords. Jill's talking about cryptocurrency. That stuff, it's some point gets scary to me. And he said, gosh, get up there and you can teach them everything you know about crypto or cybersecurity. And I said, gosh, I don't know much about it, but I've been a victim of it twice here in the last 18 months between debit cards, credit cards, and I'm somebody that's normally pretty cautious with what I do and where I go, and we've had that happen to us twice. So one of the things that we're going to be looking to do is sometime here we're working in the office to put together or bring in an outside expert. I don't have your IT answers, so don't come and ask me questions about how to protect yourself and your computer at home. But these are things that we do want to kind of go out in the field, get an expert in that field and bring them in so that there's things that they can do to help all of us at home make better choices with our laptops and iPads, cell phones, banking, debit cards, credit cards, things like that, ways to kind of safeguard. Those are things that we're going to make available. And as we've got that lined up, we'll put that out in the newsletter and invite, and you're welcome to come and bring a guest. If you read through some of these things, a couple of them kind of hit home with me. It talked about the 143 million people who've been hacked with Equifax. I was one of them. I contacted the number with Equifax. They're supposed to provide like a LifeLock type protection, but you have to fill out this form and again provide all your personal information, which then again I was like, do we trust this? The information that they need to provide that year of LifeLock, is that real or not? I did submit it. Still waiting to hear back from Equifax. I haven't received anything as of yet. So in that article too, it talks about beyond the 143 million people that have been hacked, or 300 million with Yahoo, some of the new scams that they're seeing in the marketplace going into 2018. One of which kind of blew one of my shopping ideas. We've got 3 dogs at home. And so needless to say, the vacuum is never put away. I'm on the other end of it at all times. So I've got a Swiffer at one end and 2 Sharks at the other, and I run them daily. Well, one of the ideas I had around Christmas time, I told my wife, we need to get some of those like Roombas, those little vacuums that come out and vacuum and hide under the couch, and you don't ever see them, and you don't have to vacuum, right? If you read through this article on the backside, now they're talking about these bots or botnets, where these Roombas have actually been programmed in your house to start, as they're vacuuming, to start picking up data and mining for data in our houses. So when I shared that with my wife, she told me to stay on the Swiffer. No Roombas in our house. A year ago, I bought her an Alexa. I thought that was a good advice for the technology to be able to order things on Amazon easier. Thought she would use it in the kitchen for a timer. That worked well for about 30 days until we'd wake up and Alexa's in our kitchen talking in some other language that's now in our basement under a box, not plugged in. So things that, if there's things that we can do to help safeguard ourselves, yourselves, we may be looking to change, passwords, the way that you access your accounts online. The other day I logged on to my account through Social Security with my username and password. As I did that, before I could proceed, I then got a text. And you had to key in the text to be able to proceed with your username and password. That may be something that's going to continue to evolve, and if there's ways that we can put additional safeguards in place for you guys accessing your accounts online, emails, those types of things, we will try to keep that out in front of you, okay? Beyond that, one thing, Chad was talking about tax advice, telling us all to get divorced and it'll save us money, right? And it just reminded me of a story, has nothing to do with this, but I thought I would share. I haven't thought about it in about 10 years. We put on a lot of the financial aid nights for a lot of the local high schools, Bay City schools, Bertrand, Freeland, all the local high schools asked us to come out and help with their financial aid nights. And I put on those presentations where we'll spend time explaining the financial aid process and what to do and how to do it and what's included in the formulas and what is not. And this is probably about 10 years ago. And I had a gentleman come in the office and we had a good meeting. He was very detailed. He had spreadsheets, he had notes, asked some fantastic questions. I think he picked up on every single word I said in that meeting. And so he's going through and basically reciting the whole financial aid process. I'm like, gosh, you got it to a T. Every question he asked, he almost knew the answer to everything. We got done after about an hour and a half visit. He said, I got one last question. At the end, somebody asked a question about what if you're divorced? And I said, yep. And he said, you mentioned if you're divorced, then both spouses don't go on the application. Is that correct? I said, yeah, for the most part. One, the spouse that provides primary care and custody goes on. The other supporting spouse, their income and assets are not going to come into play. And he said, that's what I thought that you said. He said, great. And I said, okay. And he just sat there for a minute and he said, that makes up my mind. And I looked at him for just a second and he said, it makes perfectly good sense. He said, I've been contemplating this, for about 2 years. And he said, after our meeting tonight, he said, I got 3 kids to put through college. There's not a reason in the world that I wouldn't go do this today. So at that time, I'm like, don't go home and share with your spouse that the recommendation from Meyer & Associates was to go, and that was not the college plan. So he was as serious as could be. And again, I begged him, do not go home and share that, with your wife. I haven't seen him since. I'm hoping they got back together. But when Chad has mentioned that in a joke, it took me back 10 years. Just when you think we've seen it all, there's always, a situation we run into. So we will look for that once we have an outside expert lined up to kind of come in, and we'll talk about, again, ways that we can all kind of safeguard debit cards, credit cards, computers. In our office, we have made some changes. We no longer have a server in our office. Joe heads up a lot of our IT stuff, working with our computer company, SPI, in an attempt to, again, safeguard your information, our information. Everything now in our office is web-based. We do have 2 servers, not ours. They're not on the building's location. There's one in Michigan and another one out of state. 2 separate locations, guarded with armed guards. Jill says retinal scan stuff, so it's actually a facility. It's not servers in someone's closet in their basement. They are protected off-site in 2 separate sites. So anything we can do to continue to provide, protection of your personal information in the office, those are things we'll continue to do and share with you when we can. So, thanks.
All right, so Greg didn't want to use his slide. We made a slide for him, but he refused to use it. So, somewhere in here are some more notes. Maybe not. Get out of there. Okay, so let's talk about 2018. I I get up here? No. Okay. So let me tell you a few things. We'll start right off and tell you the first thing that happened in 2018, more tweets. Okay? But the next thing that happened, really exciting news. Ricky and Diane had their first grandbaby. Congratulations. Congratulations. And the second thing that happened, which was great news, is my youngest grandson learned to read. All right? And then the third thing that happened was my bride received the Dick and Carol Hardy Community Service Award. Good for her. And based on all that, the Marcos went right through the roof. All right, so let's talk about 2018 a little bit. It's early, but you know, the reality is the Tax Reform Act right now is in full swing. As you heard Gail and Chad talk about that. And you know, what I think you need to understand about that is we think that's what is going to help drive the markets this year. You know, when you look at it, you look at corporate America, you look at the reduction in taxes, you look at the ability for corporate America to hire new people, that money comes back into the economy. All of that stuff is going to be great for the economy, but it also for individuals, you know, Gail said you're going to see an extra $30 in your paycheck or whatever it is based on where you're at. Well, you know, you'd like to think that everybody that got that $30 is going to put it in their account. They're going to save it, right? But you know, most of us know that really probably won't happen, and most of us know that you know you're going to have a new big screen TV on your wall, or you're going to have something on there based on that extra money that you get in your account. Again, good for the economy. I mean, it's good for the economy. But we think that as this Tax Reform Act takes hold, you know, we think that it has the ability to give us some decent returns in 2018 in the market, simply because of the fact that what you're investing in are these companies. And if these companies are doing well, then what's going to happen is that your accounts are going to do well because that's where your money's actually invested. So the better they do, the better their companies fare, the better you're going to do in the portfolio increases, you know, over the course of the year. Most of the analysts agree that this particular bill will push these markets forward through 2018, at least until we get to, you know, the midterm elections. And we believe right now that's what's going to happen this year is that the Fed, even though they met today, and agreed to hold interest rates where they are at today, the potential is that we could see 3 rate hikes in 2018. Now, the 3 that we saw in 2017, if you went and looked at your bank accounts where you're getting that interest check, you know, every month off your accounts, you probably realize that those interest rates didn't really do anything for you at all in 2017. But I tell you what they did do. They raised immediately the cost of borrowing money. So if you ever look at the mortgage rates, every time the Fed raised the rate 1/4 point, the rates to borrow money went up 1/4 point, and the savings rates went nowhere. And so with that being said, we get 3 more rate hikes in 2018. You know, the anticipation would be that instead of having a 4.5% rate to borrow, you know, you're going to have a 5.5% rate to borrow, but you're hoping that maybe you're going to get a point or a 1.5 on savings. It's not going to be huge, because one of the things that's happened is that you've gotten accustomed to not getting paid. And so you're not complaining anymore because it's become the norm. And so it's going to be a long time before that norm changes and you're going to see any significant increases. There's accounts out there called fixed annuities. Fixed annuities are just, it's like a glorified CD, if you will. You buy it, let's say it's got a 5-year term on it, and you know, they pay you an interest rate at the end of 5 years, you can renew it, take your money, go do whatever you want with. But normally when you have a fixed annuity, they pay a substantially higher rate than what a bank CD does. Okay, it's usually if you go to the bank and the bank's paying you a point, you can go probably get 2 or 3% in a fixed account. What's happened is that those rates, even though the Fed has raised rates, have come down. So at a 3% level, they're now down to 2.65. And the magic number out there is 5 years. Can't tell you why. You get one for 3 years, it's not 2.65, it's like 2.2. You go to 7 years, it's like 2.1. And so the rates that we're seeing and the way the Fed is affecting those rates are not affecting fixed interest rates like you would think that they would. The only thing it has done, like Joe pointed out, is it screws up bond returns as they're manipulating the rates that are out there. So with the 3 rate hikes coming, if they come, I wouldn't anticipate you getting, all of a sudden that your bank CD is going to be paying you, 13% like it did when Carter was president. So I would say if you're lucky, you might get 1.2 or 1.3 in that area. But that's all contingent because today was the last day of Yellen's reign as Fed chair. She is done today, and a new Fed chair takes place, and so all bets are off the table. The thought is 3 rate hikes, but not sure with a new Fed president if that's really going to take place. So the next Fed meeting is down the road here next month, and we'll get a better handle on that once we see who and how that spins out. Midterm elections, they come in November. One of the things I'll say, my last political statement for the night is, I'm not sure anybody in this country has any idea where we stand politically. If you listen to Main Street media and Trump wakes up in the morning, that's a bad thing. If you listen to Fox News and Trump wakes up in the morning, that's like the second coming. So somewhere in between there's got to be some truth to that, So, but the reality is, I think when midterm elections get here, it's going to give us an idea of where we stand politically in our country. And if we do have a change in Washington, where the House or the Senate or both move from a Republican control to a Democratic control, we think that's going to have some effects on the market. It's not going to repeal the Tax Reform Act. It isn't going to necessarily decimate business or anything to that effect, but we do think it may have some impact on the market, and it's something that we have to guard ourselves against and be prepared for if, in fact, it does take place. I wish that we had more continuity, I think, in Washington, and I thought, maybe they could get along better than what they're doing now. But I guess it is what it is. So there's one thing that I can guarantee you for 2018. One thing, you can take this and take it right to the bank, okay, is that the tweets are going to continue. All right? So with that being said, I'm going to ask Mike and Joe and Greg and Eric and Chad and Gail. And by the way, I didn't know if you guys knew or not, we do have a new arm in our office now. We have 3 divorce attorneys that are on board in case anybody's looking. So while these guys are talking, while they're coming up here, I'll tell you a quick story. Mike and I have a common client that came to our office, 20 years ago, I think, and they're getting ready to retire, and they're school teachers.
He was 29 then, too. 29, yeah.
I started when I was 9, so I don't know but anyway, they were school teachers, and so as we're going through their retirement stuff, I said, well, they said, well, we just retired. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, so what retirement option did you take? And they said, well, we selected the joint and survivor option so that my spouse gets mine and I get hers and so on and so forth. But we have one unique kind of situation. I said, what's that? He said, well, we're really not married. I said, really? He said, yeah. Back in the day, my accountant told me that if we were divorced and we both filed head of household, it would save us a lot of money in tax. So we went out to Vegas and we got divorced, and that's how we've been filing our tax return. And I looked at Mike, I looked at them, and I said, well, you got a little issue here, I think. Said, yeah. I said, well, you know that joint survivor option's for your spouse, and you don't have one. And they said, oh my God, what do you think we should do? I said, you remember that little chapel you were at in Vegas? If I was you, I'd get on a plane tomorrow morning, go out there, and they did. And they remarried, and I said, and if anybody asks you, just show your original marriage certificate. So they actually followed your advice, Chad. That was really nice of you. All right, so what's that? That's it. You have anything smart more? No, you're good? No. All right, I'm good to hear that. All right, so how about it? Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
What happened to the market yesterday, you know?
It went down. Oh.
Why so much in one day?
Oh, I think that yesterday there was a talk about the Fed meeting coming up. They were looking at a rate increase coming up. I think that you're going to see some of this now coming up in this tax year. We're going to see more volatility than we saw last year. And you see a little sell-off. We've had a 2-day sell-off today. The market really struggled to close positive today. That's because Mike made a phone call and told him I was going to be here tonight. Then we have a record going that the market's always up when we talk. So that was one of the things that happened. Mike suggested that I just keep talking from now until the end of the year. But the reality is, it's just, it's a blip. And I think that when you look at it and you see a 300-point drop in the market, not something you're used to. I mean, certainly not something we're used to, but off the numbers where we are, off the $26,000 number, it's just a blip on a radar screen. And so, and I think what you're going to see is a couple of down days in the market. I think you'll see 2 or 3 up days in the market, but I think we're going to see more volatility this year than we ever saw last year. What else yes, ma'am. She's asking if the tax code will change the way Social Security is taxed. Anybody want to answer?
Quick answer, no, it hasn't changed at all.
All right, what else? Yes? Yes, Grandma. All right.
Yeah, the question was if we have a lot of money invested into insurance companies because of some of the things that are coming out with Amazon trying to get into the health industry, and directly you're going to own something, but we don't have a specific insurance style investment. The only way that they're going to fall into your platform is sheer size of their company, but it's going to be more of the pharmaceutical realm. You're not going to have you can't buy stock in Blue Cross or anything like that. So, Amazon is, I believe, end goal is looking to, home delivery of healthcare. So, people are going to have to step up their game. Amazon is a huge contender for world domination as it stands right now, and they're going to take control unless all these companies start stepping up, and Walmart is trying. Some of the other big companies are trying, and now they're reaching out into the healthcare world. So it's time to ramp up their game. Well, they have Berkshire Hathaway. Right. Yeah, and somebody that knows what they're doing with investments runs that place. So.
One of the things that I was going to say, in addition to when I talked about standard deduction doubling, and I was asked this, so I'll bring it up. For people that are over 65 or older or blind, you still get an extra amount added to your standard deduction. That hasn't gone away, so that's still around.
Any other questions? All right. Well, listen. Evaluations. Can everybody do an evaluation on Mike? It's review time. He's bucking for a pay raise. If you could do the evaluations and give them to one of us or one of the assistants and stuff, we'd certainly appreciate it. So we want to thank everybody for coming. As always, we certainly appreciate you guys being here. We appreciate the trust that you put in our firm. Honestly, we're humbled by it, and we work every day to make sure that we do everything that we possibly can to make your dreams of financial success a reality. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you.